Okay, well, here we go. Let's try this again. I'm going to shoot over to Facebook and oof, my wig is crooked. Okay. Always you gotta tell a lady to adjust her wig. Of course, right? Um, Going over to Facebook and post this link, if I can find the link. I'm a live stream virgin. So where is the link to this puppy? No idea. Oh, maybe this will do it. It says, yes, share to Facebook. Let's do that right now. Boy, Facebook is been frickin' slow as hell. And it doesn't want to load up. Oh well, screw that for now then. Here we go. Share on my timeline. Let's see here. Live, and in 2 colors. Huh, that'll do it. All right, post to Facebook. All right, for those who will be watching this in the future or watching it now, do engage. Well, the people who are watching it now, do engage in the chat. The only reason I wanted to do this live, is I thought doing it live would help me do it in one take, so there would not be much editing for Roger and his crew. And, I get to chat with you guys, and I wanted to learn how to do the live stuff, what this actually is, because it might look weird in the future. Not that I really care about looking weird, quite obviously. It is, I'm actually recording for my podcast. So this is very meta. It's me recording. So it's me recording for my YouTube channel, a video of me recording my podcast. Mind blown. Okay, so I've got 3 screens if you're wondering why I'm looking here, there, and everywhere. Over here, I've got GarageBand. Over here, I've got other stuff. Right now, I think it's Safari and Facebook. Here, obviously, is YouTube, but I'm going to need to pull up my notes. And if you see me glancing there, that means I'm looking at chat. Got it? Let's go. Let me put this screen over to the side. There we go. Now I'm looking at you. And let's pull up my notes. If Word is going to be a lady tonight. Okay, pull that over to this middle screen. And let's start GarageBand. And the context for this, again, is that I'm recording an episode, I think it's episode 8 of the Big L podcast. This isn't the episode I was going to record. I'm actually going to record another one off live, or maybe I'll just do it live. I don't care. That is part 2 of why I'm an anarchist and why you should be one too. But part 2 is, and why it really doesn't matter and we just need to get along. But the happenings of this weekend and my general discomfort over the past year for some of the direction of this party, it's just, I feel I need to address it. But I need to address it hopefully in the correct way, because a lot of the way I see these issues being addressed is not productive. It's not productive. And the purity tests and throwing people out and calling people names and, hollering about who's elected to what, it's dumb. It frankly is dumb. One thing you'll notice, and I will note it in the broadcast as well, is I don't name names, or I name names rarely, and I will be doing the same here. So while I will be going off a little bit on the issue I think we were all concerned about, and I'm wondering if you guys can hear me. Can you? Because I have it set to this microphone. Yeah, you guys should be able to hear me. Okay, great. Though I'll be going off on the issue that a lot of us were upset about. Oh, I need my headphones. That might help. Okay, while I'll be going off, repeating again, while I'll be going off on the issue that a lot of us were upset about, I'll be going off on the issue. I will not be going off on any people. And sorry, that's just how I roll. All right, let's start recording with GarageBand. And I'm making sure there's no chitter chatter. And here we go. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big L podcast. I was originally, this is entitled, I think, well, I'm going to have to start this over. I got a bug in my throat. Wow. Okay, let's start that over. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big L podcast. I know you were expecting part 2 of why I am an anarchist, what that means, and why you should be one too, particularly the part that was going to talk about why we just need to get along and it really doesn't matter. But other events intervened, and I also wanted this podcast not just to be sheerly timeless educational things, but also this libertarian's specific LP perspective on the news and happenings and things like that. And boy, was there a shitstorm over the weekend that I just feel I need to comment about. And one reason I feel I need to comment on it is that it typified a growing discomfort, dissatisfaction problem I've been having in the LP, or at least in the LP as it deals with social media. And I'll get into that in a minute. So this, I believe, is entitled "The LP Needs to Check Itself Before It Wrecks Itself." My original working title was "The LP Needs to Stop Acting Like the Incel of Political Parties." This is not a commentary I wanted to give. This is my people. This is my tribe. This is my passionate love. But we have a severe personality disorder to come to grips with. Over the years, this party has given itself whiplash, pandering first to one side and then to the other, and sometimes we even do the splits trying to pander to both. It's not a good look, and it's not our purpose. We have a popular graphic that we push that demonstrates, I think, this weird capriciousness. I'm sure you've seen it. It gets posted everywhere, and hopefully it'll be used as a graphic for this episode. It's that thing that has the 4 columns, you know, and it has positions on the left and on the right, and then there's this like intersection in the middle where we, the libertarians, allegedly dwell, where we agree with some things on the left and we agree with some things on the right, and it gives everyone the impression that we're the middle ground, the reasonable view. But we're not middle ground. We are not moderate. And in today's political sensibilities, we are not reasonable. That graphic is a bait and switch loss leader, as they say in retail. It's the lump of coal on Rudolph's nose. An honest depiction would put our intersections at the far ends of the spectrum. Inasmuch as left and right are even useful anymore, we are further left on social issues and further right on economic issues than both the right and the left. But that isn't even helpful anymore to look at it that way. There isn't even a real right and real left anymore, at least that we can relate to. I think perhaps for libertarian purposes, the terms conservative and liberal are better terms. And those aren't even perfect because classical liberals were not, you know, economic spendthrifts. But it's better than left and right, I think, conservative and liberal, because the left today is now running with its skirts lifted to socialism, communism, collective identity struggles, and the right is goose-stepping over to nationalism, identitarianism, and protectionism. In mainstream American politics, classical liberalism and classical conservatism is dead. For all intents and purposes, it's dead, at least as a majority voice. We keep pretending as if they're not. We keep pretending as if the Democratic Party is liberal and the Republican Party is conservative, and they're not. And we have close to nothing in common with either of those groups any longer. And this is another pretense I think we need to drop. What we need to appeal to is what we have in common with the people. Forget about the parties, with the core of the human spirit. And in the same way, the American Declaration of Independence did. That beautiful Declaration of Rights appealed to the inner core of man, and it did not pretend to have things in common with the king and with monarchy. And there is a good lesson to be learned there. And right now, and I would love to say it's just social media or just people who are not really involved with the party goals and the like, we are desperately courting progressive identity politics in the Libertarian Party. We have been welcoming, arms wide open, smoochy, to the far left, to our detriment and to our peril. And I know when I say this, there is always a few people who will laugh at me, some of them my friends. Those people who think it's the alt-right that's the biggest threat to us, that there's a Nazi underneath every porcupine. Whether or not there are alt-right sympathizers in our membership, and there are, the national leadership and every state leadership that I am aware of has made it clear that such ideology is not welcome. The National Party even put out a mailer inviting anyone with those sympathies to leave the party and not the door hit them, the good Lord split them. And I don't think we've ever done this in the past. I think that was, maybe we have. As I dig through history, maybe I'll find it. But I was proud of us at that moment. So anyone who would like to say that the Libertarian Party is a willing breeding grounds for the alt-right has to be purposely dishonest. We've made that crystal clear. There's no other way around it. But we need to do the same with the far left. And we have failed to do the same with the far left. And because of this, the far left has felt quite welcome in our membership. And national leadership continues to court them. And when I say national leadership, I'm speaking in general. Obviously, that isn't true of every single person. I'm in national leadership, and I don't do that. But we are a group, in this sense, there is a collective, I guess, that has a responsibility. And I can't simply say, not me, I speak in general. And even though I don't do this, and I can think of a few other people that don't do this, none of us speak for the party. I'm only speaking for myself. So I don't know how much good that does. I mean, a few months ago, the very idea of basic foundational property rights could not even be affirmed by the current LNC. And there's been no open repudiation of socialist theories of property and labor. We openly repudiated the alt-right. Why are we so shy about openly repudiating the far left? The early party wasn't shy about it. In fact, that was one of the first concerns. We'll be getting to that in LP News on Pink Flame of Liberty on my YouTube channel, is Nolan, when he would tell people that we were home to the libertarian left, people freaked out. And he said, "You're misunderstanding me. I don't mean economic left. We don't have a thing to do with that. I meant the social left," which wasn't progressivism back then. This has never been in question. We had an avowed communist on stage at convention. What could have prevented that? I don't know. I don't have the answer. And I think the cure would be worse than the disease. And so I have opposed any top-down control. I don't like top-down control. And though you might trust the LNC you got this time, you might not be able to trust the one you get next time. But I can bet you one thing. Someone would have come up with an answer if that had been Christopher Cantwell or Augustus Invictus trying to get up on stage. And I think we all know it. We are losing our grounding and our soul with this. the common member sees it. Those, and just in general, like, let's move away from the alt-right, far-left stuff. Just in general, those who dare to advocate what we ostensibly believe are mocked and marginalized. For example, and I didn't put it in my notes, I'm going to need to pull it up. I'd like to read something that the National Party put out in 1980. And let me see if I can find that. Give me a second here, folks. I'm pulling up my Google Drive, trying to think of where else I might have this document. I forgot that I wanted to reference it. And I don't think it's up on Elpedia. No, that's platforms. SOP official forms. Nope. Convention minutes, bylaws, audio, publications. Okay, here we go. I'm going to need to pull this in front of me here. Libertarian Party put this out in 1980, and I will put a link to it in the show notes. It says in big bold letters at the top, to be abolished. Department of Energy, Environmental Protection Agency, Food and Drug Administration, Occupational Health and Safety Administration, Federal Communications Commission, Federal Trade Commission, National Labor Relations Board, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Central Intelligence Agency, Federal Reserve, Social Security, Welfare, Public Schools, and Taxation. Do you think we would do that today? Why not? Positions haven't changed because in a very real way, they can't. We can hide them, but that hasn't changed them. And no matter what the deformers tried to do in 2006, they're not changed. I get into that in the very first episodes of this podcast. But most people, when I bring up those points, say, well, that won't sell. And I have to ask you honestly, if you believe that, why are you here? It's like going to church and thinking this church thing would be great if we just didn't mention Jesus. Do you think you're just going to sneak it past people like a Trojan horse? Is that honest? Why do you believe our ideology if it is so horrible that it's unspeakable? Get a grip and start loving yourself. You know, who's going to love you if you can't love yourself? And if you think radical ideas do not win or catch fire, just look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I look at her and wish libertarians could be 1/10 as bold in their convictions. So I would like to use a current situation as an example. And I will not be naming names. I don't name names. I don't think it's useful. I like to critique ideas. Need a sip of soda. And not people. People are not enemies. And generally ideas aren't either, but there are some bad ideas. But here's the current situation I'd like to use as an example. Over the past weekend, there was, and I know I'm getting the name wrong. I was corrected on this. It's not Covington Catholic. Let me look on the Book of Faces because I know I had this name wrong. Someone help me out here. I'm looking up on my wall because I've been corrected. I don't know why I keep saying Coventry. I got that stuck in my head. Covington. There we go. All right. So the current situation I would like to use is the I forgot it already again. Covington. There we go. Covington Catholic teens. Their encounter with the Native American elder and the Black Israelites. Now, on the first day this came out, many libertarians, along with many other people in this country, were led by the nose by the lying, deceitful media and eagerly joined the outrage mob that led to these kids being slandered, doxxed, and threatened, and not just them, their families, and the school who shut down the first day back. You know, that's because they felt threatened. And when more details came out, I'm glad to say most libertarians ate humble pie and used it as a lesson on how easy it is to buy into the mob mentality. It can be a sickness. But a few refused. They doubled down and continued to insist that something wicked and white and in a MAGA hat must have that way come. And I even have one good friend that seemed to delight in the fact that this will ruin that kid's life. You know, this isn't a first party shooter game, folks. These are real people with real lives. We play with them as if they're toys. I waited, and I did not get sucked into that part, although I did on another part later, which I will get to and repent of. And I posted this the next day. I watched that video again. That grown-ass man was the clear aggressor and is fortunate he didn't get hit. You don't get in people's faces like that swinging a stick. The kid flinched multiple times. That is assault. And in response, one of the first responses were some screenshots of some tweets that were allegedly made by that young man's mother that were racist. Well, genocidal, actually, more specifically. And my response was, children are not guilty of the sins of the parents. And parents whose kids all of a sudden are made into a national villain and getting death threats can act irrational. But that didn't matter anyway because the account was fake. And anyone could have investigated that, but they didn't. They just ran with that narrative and slandered that kid's mother. And the one person that posted it refused to back down even after it was proven fake. In this incident, there is zero proof that those kids ever chanted, "Build the wall." And there is every indication from what they did chant that that wouldn't happen. The grown adult Native American man outright lied about these teens. They did not surround him. He approached them. He went into their space and purposely stood inches away from that young man's face. And you got to see the video with the there's one with a really good angle, and you can see that the drum is inches away from the kid's shoulder, and that he probably felt the air move from that drum mallet each time it swung, which is why he kept flinching with his eyes. This is all indisputable. But there are some disputable facts. And this is another problem in the discourse where we think everyone either needs to be, sinner or saint, devil or angel without any middle grounds. And that's rarely the case. The young man said that he felt that the native elder targeted him and walked straight up to him. Now, maybe he was mistaken and it just appeared to him to be that way. A lot was going on. But knowing that is his impression, his simply standing there makes perfect sense. Now, the elderly native man said he didn't target that teen. Okay, maybe he didn't. And it just worked out that way. And perhaps His just standing there made sense to him because he explained in his cultural view, young people should always stand aside for their elders. So there was a clash here, perhaps, of different perceptions. But none of that excuses him getting right up into that young man's face. We would call this bowing up if it was in a bar brawl. It was, most ironically, a classic toxic masculine move. He was trying to intimidate that kid and by force of his will, force him to move, to give up obeisance. Obeisance? You know what I'm saying. Sometimes the way I mangle words is quite entertaining. No one surrounded this gentleman. He voluntarily went there, and he could have easily turned and went somewhere else. One thing is indisputable. The young man did not walk up and stand in front of him. It isn't as if the elderly gentleman was walking in a line and he had a target that he could see out in the future, a destination. Target's the wrong word. And this young man got in front of him. This young man was standing there. Whether or not you think it's disrespectful, he didn't move. That's beside the point. That was his spot. He had every right to be there. And if he thought that this person was challenging him and that this was going to possibly, escalate into something, I understand his standing there and just being quiet. Some people say they don't like the look on his face. Okay, really? I mean, I get it. A lot of times teenage boys have a lot of looks on their face that I don't like, but that doesn't make them bad people or racist. I mean, I see some looks on women's faces I don't like. It didn't look to me like he was smirking. It looked to me like he was very uncomfortable. And I can tell you, I had almost that same look. And I actually thought it was funny, but it's still awkward. When I was at the Texas convention, I was standing behind a booth, and for some reason, there's this group of people who've just decided that I'm authoritarianism incarnate, and they decided to kazoo serenade me. And I wonder what the look I had on my face, because it was just like, I wasn't upset. I was actually entertained, but it's awkward. It's awkward when someone's standing there doing something like that. Perhaps people have never been in that awkward situation like that, but I found his reaction completely understandable. It was a strained, oh my God, this is so embarrassing smile. Now, I've gotten some criticism for calling this incident an assault. And I think there's two reasons for that. Most people do not know what the legal definition of assault is because, we've been watching too much Law and Order, and we see it's usually paired with battery, assault battery. And, that requires physical contact. Assault does not require physical contact, and you can have battery without assault. If I just walk up to you and you don't see me coming and I hit you in the face, that's battery, but it's not assault. Here is the legal definition of assault. It is a threat or attempt to inflict offensive physical contact or bodily harm on a person, such as lifting a fist in a threatening manner that puts the person in immediate danger of or in apprehension of such harm or contact. Getting up to somebody and staring them down and getting in their space and swinging a mallet in front of their face is the textbook definition of assault. The aggressor here was a grown adult who chose to get in a kid's face to assert his privilege. And we have many people in LP defending the aggressor. All I can say is WTAF. Now, some people will say it's not assault because the kid wasn't in fear, and it does require fear, and it does, I guess, require intent. That's hard to prove, I suppose, but I think the gentleman had said that he was confronting the young man because he felt he should move aside because he should respect his elders. And the young man did say that he was intimidated. He said that he feared an escalation. His eyes flinched, And when one of his friends was getting into an argument with one of the other native peoples, who was telling him to go back to Europe and this isn't your country, racist things to another one of the MAGA teens, the kid who was the subject of this controversy turned around and gestured for his classmate to cut it out. He de-escalated that situation because he feared an escalation. Now, this story perhaps hit more of a note with me than other people because a very similar incident happened to me, and it is directly relevant to the Libertarian Party. It was the 2016 convention. Let me get another drink. Some of you are tired of me telling the story, and I'll tell you at the end why I keep telling it. Those of you who are there know it got quite rambunctious when there was all the floor conventioneering for the presidential candidate. And I had been supporting Darryl Perry. I gave Darryl Perry's nomination speech, and I had one of Darryl's signs. And everyone was walking around the rooms, you know, the big room with their campaign signs. And I was walking around with the Darryl Perry sign. And all of a sudden, I became aware that there was a very large man following me really closely. And it was just really uncomfortable. And then he would get in front of me and stop. Okay. I didn't want anything. And it was a guy holding the Johnson sign. Now, I don't impute any of this to Gary Johnson. He can't help who held his signs. So I'm like, I'm going to go back to where the Colorado delegation is. You know, I felt threatened. And I was like, no. So I went back to where the Colorado delegation was, and it had one of those big walkways right in front of it. And he follows me there. And there's a chair in front of the table where my seat was, because I had been sitting there when they were doing votes where standing counts, and I didn't want to be counted as in favor of something. So in order to get away from this man, I climbed up on that chair, and he still stood there, his face right to me, but I'm above him a little bit now because I climbed down the chair, and kept sticking his sign right in my face. And I kept saying, get out of my space. I'm feeling threatened. Back off. Get away from me. And he wouldn't. That is assault. And one of the Colorado delegates saw it that way too, because I found out afterwards. Thank God for this guy. And he's not the biggest, burliest guy in the party. He probably would have gotten creamed that one of the fellow delegates was just then taking his suit jacket off because he thought he was going to have to fly over the table guy. And then something happened and the crowd dispersed. Maybe, you know, vote results came up or something, but it ended up dispersing. I was shaken. And I went over to the Gary Johnson floor team and complained and said, you need to get that guy away from your signs. And it was brushed off. He's not one of ours. Well, you can do something about it. You can find out who it is. You can get security here or something, but it was just brushed off, and I felt stupid. You know, I was like, okay, well, maybe, you know, well, okay. Then I found out later that the guy who had observed it, that was about to jump this guy, saw it, and he's like, no, you're not overreacting. That was pretty bad. And I've been complaining about this ever since. And the LP has yet to officially acknowledge it. And when it came to the 2018 convention, you would think hopefully that there would be some kind of, you know, announcement or rules of conduct or something that would say, you know, don't intimidate people, don't get up in people's faces, or there would be, you know, visible security or instructions on what to do if this would happen again. Nope, didn't happen. This is an issue, and we need to deal with it. Our party does not handle complaints of sexism, intimidation, and harassment well. And I use those three instances because I've had one of each, and none of them were handled properly. I might have been utterly wrong in all or one of them. Who would know? But one day, this kind of thing is going to bite the LP in the ass. There needs to be a much better process of dealing with wrongdoers in our midst. But if we are excusing similar aggressors in news stories because they are the minority, would a man then have any hope if he was being assaulted by a woman at an LP event of being believed? I would think not. I was a woman, much larger man, and I still wasn't taken seriously. Back to the incident with the teens. The real villains in this whole thing were the Black Israelites, who were absolutely rank homophobic racists. The kids were merely responding like goofy, overly enthused sports fans singing their team song. It wasn't even a political response. And when the indigenous peoples first approached, the kids never in a million years thought that they were coming to rebuke them because they weren't doing anything wrong. They thought the group was coming to join them because, I mean, really, they were getting called all kinds of vile things by the Black Israelites. And you can see when the natives first walked up, the kids started laughing and dancing with them. It wasn't mockery. It was like, hey, here's some more people who are joining us and laughing at the Black Israelites. And several kids foolishly and definitely stupidly and insensitively did the tomahawk chop. That's a completely immature reading of the situation. They should never have done that. Kids sometimes aren't the most culturally sensitive, and I hope an adult took them aside and dealt with that. But it was not malicious. And it was certainly in line with the sports theme. You see this going on all the time at sports events. Whether it should or not, it's another matter. And the kids knocked it right off once they saw that they misread the situation and that the natives were not their allies. This whole situation was about identity and a kid wearing the wrong clothing. In other words, he was asking for it. Nowadays, if a white male gets assaulted, you ask what he's wearing. Seems to me we were opposed to that sort of thing when it was a different gender. And some people really had the colossal nerve to trash and slander this young man by slyly insinuating that he was the ideological kin of some white punks staring down a Black man at a lunch counter sit-in. Imagine you're the parents of this kid. Imagine you're this kid. But it's all pixels. I think that's why we do it. We wouldn't do it to someone's face. The MAGA hat is not racist. The fact that some people have hysterically taken it that way does not obligate anyone else to take it that way. I think it's nationalistic tripe. But comparing it to the KKK hood is disgustingly trivializing. The fact that some racists may wear MAGA hats is irrelevant. The Black Lives Matter gear is not racist, despite many right-wing commentaries saying it's racist. And there are some racists who wear it. But that doesn't make it inherently racist. It's not. Let's imagine a slightly different situation in front of that monument this weekend. It was said to me that the Black Israelites are kind of like Westboro Baptist Church, and they are. They're just like outrageously insulting and very, very, very homophobic. So let's say the Westboro Baptist Church was out there with their typical nonsense, which I'm just not even going to say. We all know it. And there was a school group of Black teens who were wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts, who responded exactly the same way those Catholic teens did. by singing school songs, by being boisterous teenagers. Do you really think the Native man would have done the same thing? He would not. He would have seen the kids rightfully as the unjust objects of abuse by the whacked out Westboro Baptists. Nothing really has changed with changing the players, unless merely being white with the wrong hat and the wrong genitals is justification. And if so, that is gross racial profiling. And it is disgusting that libertarians are buying into this. You people who did that, you are the problem. And you were being racist. And I don't buy the Newspeak definition of racism that completely absolves always the people with the new definition. It just conveniently absolves them. It's not prejudice plus power, but let's say it did require power. The people being prejudiced against these boys have power. They had power to close down that school. They had power to threaten those families. They had power to say these kids' lives would be ruined and to lionize the actual aggressor. Because believe it or not, Native Americans can be wrong. Or, as progressives so often do, are they buying into the racist trope of the noble savage and infantilizing this grown man? And it gets worse. The skank media, who I hope gets sued like Gawker with porn tapes, then ran to try to find anything to justify going after that school. Because, it's a pit of future white toxic men. And they found, and religious, and pro-lifers. And they found a picture that they promoted as being kids from that school and being described as openly mocking a black man while they were wearing blackface, or at least one of them was wearing blackface. And I have to tell you, when I first saw that picture and the caption, my knee-jerk reaction was, I read, and my exact words were, "Fuck that school." That was my knee-jerk reaction. I should have known better. More facts came out, and I ate my words. This was not blackface. In a little bit of my defense, I know nothing about sports, but I should have noticed that everyone in that picture was wearing black, big clue, and that the school itself, a religious school, published this photo. What kind of anti-Catholic bigotry does it take to think that some Catholic school would just go, "Hey, how do you like our racist students? What do you think of this blackface kid tormenting this black man?" Do you really think that the school itself would have posted that proudly? And to atomize it as yelling at a black man, no, they were yelling at the opposing team, and one of its members happened to be black. It was the opposing team. And me, who doesn't even know anything about sports, knows that yelling at the opposing team is kind of the point. I mean, I've been to some sports events. Like, I used to go to hockey a lot when I was in Florida. When the Florida Panthers, they were throwing the rats on the ice. It was wonderful. But I only went to hockey, the fights. And now that they don't fight anymore, I don't go anymore. So, they ruined it for me. But I did plenty of yelling. Or is it now we can't yell at opposing teams or opposing players if they are a different race? Holy shit. Do you see how patronizing, provincial, great white savior syndrome that is? I don't get it. And even after the facts came out that this was a blackout game, which is everyone comes in black, and sports people, like, I don't get it, take any opportunity to like paint their whole bodies. I've seen it. And even Snopes had to admit that this had nothing to do with blackface. There was speculation after the fact, years after the fact, that maybe the one kid in the picture did some reading on minstrels because he had some white paint around his mouth and his eyes. Maybe that's what this kid was doing, right? And maybe he's an axe murderer, right? Most teenagers don't even know what a minstrel or blackface even is. Oh, but he had the white around his eyes and mouth, like a minstrel. Really? First of all, white isn't the iconic look of a minstrel. The iconic look, the really iconic racist look of a minstrel were these exaggerated red lips, though later they did use white. So, okay, partly right. But if anyone was bothering to notice that he did have white around his lips and his eyes, then any responsible adult should have noticed that it wasn't in minstrel style. The mouth wasn't in that like clown rounded corner minstrel style, but it was a big grin like the Joker. Nothing at all like blackface. And as it turns out, the near certain explanation is that it was a tribute to Venom, a villain who was all black, painted everywhere, and he had a big grinning white mouth and white around his eyes. Why isn't that the more reasonable explanation? Why do we jump to this kid we don't even know being a racist? Why do we assume that? When people do, literally, maybe this is just me now and my reverse outrage, but I'm like, how dare you? And no one can deflect by saying, oh, I never said the kid was racist. I just said he was in blackface. Come on. That's obfuscation worthy of Bill Clinton. Blackface is by definition racist. It's not merely putting on blackface. It is putting on black paint in order to insultingly imitate a black person. That is what blackface means. This culture has stooped to slandering, doxing, and intimidating children in the name of intersectional bullshit. And even for some of those who realized afterwards that they were wrong about the kids, it didn't matter. They were collateral damage. Just like it was said in the Me Too movement, it doesn't matter that some innocent men get destroyed. The Libertarian Party platform says bigotry is irrational and repugnant, and it is. And that includes bigotry against young white Catholic teen boys. Last convention, we passed this into the platform. Libertarians reject the notion that groups have inherent rights. We support the rights of the smallest minority, the individual. And that is where the LP needs to check itself before it wrecks itself. Group identity, intersectional politics has nothing to do with individualism. And as I also said on Facebook, and that's what inspired me to do the show, all of us in LP leadership at any level, and that's quite a few of us, national, state, county, you've been given a bully pulpit. And I will use mine to counter this odd fascination with kissing progressive ass and bowing at the altar of collective identity politics. And if next year we do our whiplash thing again and we start kissing the ass of identitarian nationalistic bullshit, I will call that out too. I'm not left or right. I'm libertarian. And here's the irony. My very definite female privilege gives me more opportunity to speak than many of my male counterparts. But if those men are going to buy this narrative, they should just be quiet and let the woman talk, right? Obviously, I don't believe that. But there is an unfortunate fact that there is female privilege. All right. I will be recording the anticipated part 2 of the last episode. I'll record it ahead of time so it will go in the patron feed so that patrons of the Big L will be able to hear it sooner. I do invite you to support this podcast. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And if you appreciated the message, help me amplify it. Thank you so very much and have an awesome night. Mi guapas de libertad. Well, all right, everyone. I'm going to be signing off. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I would love to hear some feedback. Until then, later, alligator. In a while, crocodile.